I had been to Nha Trang twice before, but to be honest, I didn't like it that much. So I never imagined myself staying here longer. But this time, I finally spent a full month here, and I absolutely loved it. So today, I want to share every single dollar I spent during those 30 days. How far can $700 stretch in one of the most beautiful yet underrated coastal cities in Southeast Asia? And what kind of lifestyle can you actually get with that budget? I know this number might sound a bit hard to process at first. When you hear it, it probably sounds like a very strict budget setup. But in reality, this covered all my regular monthly expenses for a genuinely comfortable everyday life. Honestly, even more comfortable than some people might expect. It includes the rent for my place with a nice balcony, eating out for almost every meal, lots of Vietnamese and specialty coffees, health insurance, visa costs, renting a bicycle, and using public buses. Even taxis, laundry services, regular billiards with friends, a few live music nights, drinks, and a pretty active social life overall. Of course, lifestyle plays a huge role, and everyone prefers different lifestyles. Some people spend way more without even trying, while others I know personally spend less and still enjoy their time here. In this video, I'll break down not only every major expense based on my personal experience, but also the overall vibe of this city. And more importantly, I'll talk about the downsides and deal breakers that people usually avoid mentioning, just to make everything look perfect online. So, let's get into it. But before we dive into prices and monthly expenses, there's a very natural question. Why would anyone even consider living in Nha Trang? To be honest, I asked myself the same question. As I mentioned earlier, this is actually my third time here. The first 2 times, I really didn't like it. It felt like a complete tourist town, a lot of Russian tourists, people drinking beer at 9 in the morning, menus in Russian everywhere, and after visiting a few overpriced restaurants with pretty average food, I constantly felt like I was overpaying and not getting much value in return. And just to be clear, it's not really about Russians themselves. I actually have Russian friends, and most of the people I've met here were well-educated, interesting, and easy to talk to. It was more about the overall atmosphere and the feeling that everything around me existed mainly for short-term tourism. But this time was very different. I came back more prepared and stayed in a completely different area. I spent more time properly exploring the city instead of only staying near the beachfront. And slowly, my perspective started to change. I began noticing a completely different side of Nha Trang. More local neighborhoods, quieter streets, small family-run restaurants with lovely owners who sometimes even remember your spice preferences. Cafés that weren't trying to sell some fake experience. Just good coffee and a welcoming place to spend time. I also spent time exploring beyond the city itself, visiting nearby fishing islands and getting a little closer to how local people actually live here. That added a completely different layer to the experience. And visually, this city is honestly stunning. Beautiful beaches directly next to green mountains just a short ride away. If you enjoy hiking, viewpoints, or simply watching sunsets from higher places, it's hard not to appreciate the scenery here. Another thing that surprised me was the infrastructure. Even though the city is relatively small, it still has an international airport, modern shopping malls, electric public buses, wide roads, and surprisingly clean streets. Combined with the fresh fruit markets and overall convenience of daily life, it slowly becomes easier and easier to like this city. So somewhere along the way, I realized I had been completely wrong about this place. Nha Trang is still touristy, yes, especially compared to Da Nang, which feels much bigger and more spread out. But once you move a little away from the main tourist areas, there's a very relaxed and enjoyable lifestyle underneath. Even though the population is only around 400,000, the city feels surprisingly energetic because life here feels concentrated. You constantly see people dancing tango and Latin dances on the streets, music jam sessions near the beach, outdoor workouts, and football games during sunset. It's the kind of place where you unexpectedly meet people who make you feel good almost immediately. And honestly, that's the version of Nha Trang I want to show you in this video. When you first arrive, finding long-term accommodation can feel surprisingly expensive, especially for a relatively small coastal city, where many people expect everything to be cheap. What most newcomers quickly realize is that the city has two completely different price ranges. If you stay around Lok Tho or along the high rises of Tran Phu Street, you're mostly dealing with tourist prices and beachfront markups. But once you move toward more local neighborhoods like Vinh Hoa in the north, or a few kilometers inland to Vinh Diem Trung, prices change noticeably. Especially if you have a scooter, giving up the front row sea view for a short ride suddenly gives you access to a much more affordable local housing market. There are several ways to find a place. Of course, you can book through Airbnb or Booking.com. You can also use rental agents, and in Vietnam, tenants usually don't pay agent fees since the landlord normally covers them. Or you can keep it simple like I did. Rent something for a few days first, then walk around neighborhoods looking for apartments for rent signs. Just walk in and speak directly with the owner. They're often open to negotiating, especially for longer stays during low season. And honestly, nobody really likes paying agent fees anyway, so there's usually some room to discuss the price. That's exactly how I found my apartment. It's nothing luxurious, but it has everything I need. Large windows with natural light, decent water pressure, a small balcony, and a good location. Honestly, that was already enough for me. Facebook groups are another option people often mention, although in my experience, they're not very active here, especially during high season when landlords focus more on short-term rentals. And staying away from the main tourist areas doesn't just make rent cheaper, the whole atmosphere changes. It becomes quieter, more local, and much more relaxed. Cafes feel less touristy, daily life slows down, and the city starts feeling more like a real neighborhood instead of a beach resort. A reasonable price for an apartment like this is usually somewhere between 6 and 10 million per month. For my place, I pay 7 million, less than $270 US. And from talking to other foreigners here, this seems like a pretty common price range if you know where to look. Some people pay even less, especially with longer contracts and direct negotiation. However, finding a good price is one thing. Knowing what to avoid is another. First, spend some time checking the neighborhood before renting. Nha Trang is developing very quickly. Construction is everywhere, and noise can sometimes become a real issue. Second, always check for karaoke spots nearby. Karaoke is a huge part of Vietnamese culture, and while it can be fun to watch people singing without caring how they sound, it becomes a very different experience when you're trying to sleep. And finally, watch for mold. Because of the humidity, some apartments, especially lower floors, can develop mold quite easily. Always check corners, walls, and bathrooms carefully before deciding. From November to March, it's not too hot here, so during this period I don't really use air conditioning. My electricity bill usually stays under 500,000 per month. But starting from April, it gets really hot and humid, so you'll probably start using the AC whenever you're at home. Even then, it rarely goes over 1 million, mostly because the standard electricity rate is around 4,000 per kilowatt. Water is very cheap, usually just a couple of dollars per month for a single person. Decent Wi-Fi is often included in the rent, which means one less expense and lets you stay connected from day one. Since I don't have a washing machine, I use local laundry services. The prices vary depending on the place, but the one I use regularly charges 17,000 per kilogram, which keeps my monthly laundry cost under $8. Vietnamese food is definitely one of my favorites in the world, so maybe I'm a little biased when talking about it. One thing you notice quite quickly in Nha Trang is that many restaurants have menus in Russian, which usually means they focus mostly on short-term tourists. Even though these places often look nice and welcoming, you'll probably end up paying tourist prices for fairly average food. Like almost everywhere in Vietnam, some of the best meals come from small local restaurants with red plastic chairs, simple menus with only a few dishes, and owners cooking the same food every single day for years. The food often tastes fresher, more authentic, and costs 3 times less. Of course, you'll still find all the Vietnamese classics everywhere, like banh mi and bún cha, but being a coastal city, seafood naturally becomes a much bigger part of daily life here, especially around local markets, where you constantly see fresh squid, local fish, oysters, snails, and small seafood places packed with locals. A full meal at a local family-run restaurant usually costs around $40,000 to $50,000. That's a proper freshly cooked dish, often served with tea or filtered water. No extra charges, nothing complicated. Realistically, this is where many long-term foreigners end up eating most of the time. And whenever you want international food or a nice brunch with friends, there are plenty of options here. Western restaurants, healthy cafes, vegan places, Japanese, Italian, pretty much everything. The city honestly has more variety than many people expect, especially considering how small the city is. Even international chains like Pizza Hut or KFC are easy to find if you ever miss more familiar food. But once again, around the beachfront and tourist areas, prices can become noticeably higher for almost the same meals. After a while, you naturally develop your own routine. You find a few reliable places, keep coming back, and eventually the owners start recognizing you. Sometimes they even remember small things like how spicy you want your food. Those little interactions make daily life feel more personal and comfortable, and you slowly start feeling settled. When it comes to groceries, my situation is quite simple. Since I don't have a kitchen, I don't really cook at home. And honestly, in Vietnam, eating out is often cheaper and more convenient than cooking yourself. By the way, does anyone actually know why cooking at home in Vietnam somehow ends up being more expensive no matter how hard you try? Leave a comment because I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. So my grocery spending stays fairly low. Snacks for movie nights, coffee, fruit, and a lot of bottled water. Like almost everywhere else in Vietnam, tap water isn't drinkable here. So unfortunately, you end up buying quite a lot of plastic bottles. Local markets are usually cheaper and fresher than supermarkets, and honestly, much easier to navigate than many people expect, even without speaking Vietnamese. Convenience stores and supermarkets are everywhere too, although prices can still vary depending on the area, even within the same chain. Over time, most people naturally develop a mix. Local restaurants for daily meals, markets for fruit and snacks, supermarkets for convenience, and international food occasionally when they want a break from Vietnamese cuisine. If you live this way, you'll probably spend around 5 to 6 million dong per month, roughly $200. And considering that you're eating out almost every day, the overall value honestly feels very reasonable. For some reason, I always keep a separate monthly budget of around $1.5 million, just for coffee when I stay in Vietnam. If there's one thing Vietnam in general does exceptionally well, it's coffee. Not only is it cheap, it's also very high quality and surprisingly strong. Those bold Robusta flavors really grow on you after a while. Local cafes are everywhere. It's almost impossible to walk more than a few minutes without seeing one. And what makes the coffee scene here especially interesting is the variety. You'll find everything from tiny local cafes with plastic chairs and incredibly strong Vietnamese coffee, to beautifully designed modern spaces that could easily fit into any major European city. A traditional Vietnamese black coffee, Café Den or Café Xoa Da, usually costs around $17 to $25. Strong, flavorful, sometimes mixed with condensed milk, and powerful enough to wake you up for the entire day. At first you think it's nothing special, but slowly you realize you can't really start your morning without an iced salted coffee. Of course, there are also plenty of modern cafes serving great espresso-based drinks and excellent Arabica blends. Prices there are usually higher, around $40,000 to $70,000, but still very reasonable, especially considering the atmosphere many of these places offer. And honestly, the atmosphere is a huge part of the experience. Vietnamese cafe owners seem to genuinely love plants. Many cafes feel like small urban gardens filled with trees and flowers. Most places have good Wi-Fi and naturally become workspaces and social hubs, or simply somewhere to escape the midday heat. Cafes are deeply connected to daily life here. Then there are the co-working spaces. Besides chains like Starbucks and Highlands Coffee, where you often see expats working on laptops, there are also smaller co-working places like Stockholm Co-working. It's a modern space with comfortable seating, strong Wi-Fi, meeting rooms, and a quiet work environment. A daily pass costs $150,000, while a monthly unlimited membership is $2.7 million, around $100, and even includes coffee and drinks. But honestly, many people here simply work from cafes instead, and I completely understand why. I often do the same just for the flexibility and change of atmosphere. Some cafes here are genuinely very pleasant places to spend a few hours working. For digital nomads and slow travelers, this becomes one of the city's biggest advantages. That's probably why many foreigners here, including me, rarely end up paying for co-working spaces long term. Even though Nha Trang has a population of under 400,000, it actually has a fairly usable public transportation system. The buses are modern, electric, and surprisingly easy to use. You can either tap your card or pay in cash directly on the bus. By the way, one thing I still don't fully understand is why there is always a person working on each bus instead of just using electronic payment terminals everywhere. If anyone knows the reason, let me know in the comments. A single ride within the city costs $15,000, while the airport route is $50,000, which honestly feels very reasonable. But in reality, the bus network is still quite limited and doesn't cover the entire city very well. So scooters naturally dominate daily life here. Locals love the freedom they give, and most foreigners quickly adapt to the same lifestyle. Renting a scooter becomes the default option for many long-term visitors. For example, a Vietnamese-made electric scooter usually costs around $1.8 million per month. These modern bikes make life very simple. No fuel costs, quiet to ride, and easy to handle for everyday use. Many foreigners also choose to buy second-hand motorbikes instead and resell them before leaving Vietnam, often through Facebook Marketplace. And if you stay for a few months, buying can easily become cheaper than renting. Personally, I still don't ride scooters after having a small accident, so I mostly use Grab, which is basically the Asian version of Uber, especially motorbike rides for longer distances. Most trips cost around $20,000 to $40,000, often less than $2. Cheap, fast, and available almost everywhere. Cycling is another great option. The city is mostly flat, streets are fairly wide, and bicycle rentals are around $50,000 per day for short-term use, while long-term rentals are much cheaper. It's also a nice way to exercise while exploring quieter neighborhoods or the more remote parts of the city. In my case, mixing walking, taking Grab, and occasional bicycle rides keeps my monthly transportation costs under $700. And I think for a city this size, that feels like a great value. As I mentioned earlier, Nha Trang is actually a pretty active city. Of course, compared to Da Nang, there are fewer options overall, but you still end up finding plenty of ways to socialize, stay active, and entertain yourself. One thing I really like here is the casual live music scene near the beach. Small places where expats gather in the evenings, playing guitar, and just hanging out together. Nothing too organized or commercial, just very relaxed and spontaneous. But the part that feels most special to me is probably the social dancing. And interestingly, it's not really an expat activity. Most of the time it's local people, often older Vietnamese who know each other from dance classes, gathering in the evenings to practice tango, bachata, salsa, and other partner dances. They switch partners, teach each other, laugh, and simply enjoy the moment. Everyone looks genuinely happy, and honestly, just sitting nearby and watching them has become one of my favorite parts of the city's atmosphere. And of course, living here, you constantly see groups of locals exercising outdoors under energetic music. Some groups are large, others smaller, but people are usually very welcoming if you want to join. Beach workout stations are everywhere as well, and you'll often see people jogging, stretching, or exercising near the sea. Since I haven't been going to the gym recently, this honestly feels like one of the best cities for outdoor workouts, especially with the ocean breeze and the view. Hiking is another huge advantage for me personally. I'm a big fan of it, so being only 20 minutes away from beautiful mountain trails feels amazing. A lot of locals and long-term foreigners spend their weekends there, and after a while you start recognizing familiar faces on the way. The nightlife here is also pretty relaxed. There are many beach bars where you just grab a drink, sit near the water, and enjoy the atmosphere. A local beer like Huda or Saigon usually costs around $30,000, while imported or craft beers in more upscale places can range between $70 and $90. Cocktails can be noticeably more expensive, so it's always worth checking the menu before ordering. Playing football with locals has also become something I really enjoy. It's a good way to stay active, socialize naturally, and meet new people without forcing anything. And then there's billiards. You'll see billiard clubs everywhere in Vietnam, including here. Locals absolutely love it, and sooner or later, you'll probably end up playing a few games yourself. After a while, you suddenly realize you've built a small routine here. Favorite cafes, familiar bars, people you keep running into. New friends appear naturally, almost without planning. And honestly, maintaining an active social life here doesn't require a huge budget. For most people, monthly entertainment stays around $1 million. Of course, if you go out often or prefer more upscale places, it's very easy to spend more without really noticing. Now let's talk about some of the smaller everyday expenses that people usually forget to include, but that still add up over time. Mobile data in Vietnam is extremely cheap. I use a local Vinaphone SIM card, and my monthly plan costs around $125, less than $5, with more than enough data for daily use. One quick tip, always register your SIM at an official store with your passport, otherwise you might end up with a tourist SIM that expires after a few weeks. Haircuts are also very affordable. A simple local barbershop usually costs around $60. Nothing fancy, but clean and fast. Basic household items like shampoo, toothpaste, and detergent usually stay under $200,000 per month for me. Convenience stores are everywhere, so buying everyday essentials is very easy. Altogether, these smaller expenses usually add around $400,000 per month to the budget. And finally, for health insurance, I use Safety Wing. I currently pay $62 every 4 weeks. It's been reliable so far, and the customer support has been helpful when needed. I'll leave the link in the description in case anyone wants to check it out. Alright, now let's put everything together. These numbers are based on my real monthly spending here in Nha Trang. Nothing luxurious, but also no extreme budgeting. Just a normal, comfortable, everyday lifestyle. In total, it comes to around 18.5 million dong per month, which is roughly $700 US. That includes basically everything: rent, food, transport, health insurance, coffee shops, eating out, social life, and all the small expenses people usually forget. Laundry, haircuts, billiards, live music, and random weekend plans. Of course, some people spend much more while others live on far less. But for me, this kind of budget gives a very relaxed and easy lifestyle here. One thing people rarely talk about when it comes to living abroad long-term is all the practical stuff happening in the background. At first, moving abroad feels exciting and simple, but after a while, questions start coming up. What address do you use for banking? What about taxes, mail, residency, or keeping everything legally organized back home while you're constantly moving between countries? That's where companies like Savvy Nomad become useful. This is actually something I've been looking into myself. They help Americans living abroad establish Florida residency, save on taxes, and manage their mail remotely. Honestly, this stuff matters more than people realize. Once you have a proper setup behind the scenes, life abroad starts feeling much more stable and sustainable long-term, instead of constantly improvising everything month by month. So if you're seriously thinking about building a lifestyle abroad, definitely check them out. You can click the link in the description or scan the QR code. You can also use the code NOMADNEST for a $50 discount. Now let's quickly talk about visas, probably one of the more confusing parts of staying in Vietnam long-term. Vietnam still doesn't feel like a classic expat hub like Bali or Thailand. A lot of foreigners here are doing shorter stays, visa runs, or slow travel, rather than fully relocating long-term. There's also no dedicated digital nomad visa at the moment, so most people simply use the standard visa system. For many foreigners, the 90-day e-visa is the most common option. You apply online through the official government website, pay around $25 for single entry, and usually receive approval within a few days. After those 90 days, many people briefly leave the country, usually flying to nearby places like Kuala Lumpur or Bangkok, then return with a new e-visa a few days later. Others take a bus through visa agencies to the Cambodian border and come back the same evening with a fresh 90-day visa. I know this might sound like a strange long-term solution, but honestly, The process is usually pretty straightforward and seems to work fine so far. And if you work for a Vietnamese company or open a business locally, you can also apply for a work visa and temporary residence card, which is a much more stable long-term option. Of course, no place is perfect, and this city definitely has its downsides too. The first thing many people notice is how touristy parts of the city feel. Sometimes it can feel less like a Vietnamese city and more like an international beach resort. And just to be clear, this is not really about Russians themselves. I've met plenty of great Russian people here. It's more about the overall atmosphere that heavy tourism creates in certain parts of the city. Nha Trang is also much smaller and less diverse. After a while, some people start feeling that daily life becomes repetitive. There are fewer neighborhoods to explore, fewer events, and overall less variety in general. The weather can also become exhausting for some people. During the hotter months, the heat and humidity feel intense, especially around midday. And during the rainy season, heavy rain and occasional flooding can happen as well. English levels outside tourist areas are also fairly limited, so simple daily tasks sometimes require patience, gestures, or translation apps. And finally, like many places in Vietnam, karaoke culture is everywhere. Most evenings are peaceful, but sometimes someone suddenly decides to sing at full volume late at night. And unfortunately, your windows won't save you. And still, despite all of that, I ended up enjoying Nha Trang much more than I expected, and will definitely come back next year to spend more time here.